If you're looking for a place to hang out, figure out where you can take the next step in your dairy farming business, then you're in the right spot. Welcome to the High Performance Herd podcast. Here we will inform you what you can do today to future-proof your business for tomorrow. A big thanks to our sponsors Fonterra, Idexx, Koru Diagnostics, TasHerd, Tasmanian Dairy Trust, Zoetis, NHIA, Datamars. I'm your host, Andrew Savage. Enjoy this episode of the High Performance Herd podcast wherever you may be listening. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode, and jump on our Facebook group, the High Performance Herd Project. Today we're catching up with Ollie Roberts from pasture. Ollie is from a family dairy farm here in Tasmania. He has spent time managing his dairy farm near Boat Harbour in the northwest of Tassie, and at one stage he invested in a herd of milking cows and had young stock before selling them to follow off-farm pursuits such as pasture. Ollie has gone on to found pasture, a system that is saving farmers thousands of hours in labour by managing pasture from space. Hi Ollie, and welcome to the High Performance Herd Project. And tell us something about yourself that perhaps people don't know about you.
G'day, Andrew. Well, that's quite a question. So, something about myself. I'm an avid bird photographer who loves spending time in the bush, and that gets me close to nature and frees the head and everything. And I love being out in the elements, taking photos of birds and observing what's happening. It's a bit like cows. My love for cows and their gentle nature, a similar sort of love, but with birds. So that's something that people might not know about me.
That's really cool. And I guess being an entrepreneur, you've had a pretty full-on journey into the digital world and that type of thing. So having a way of releasing your mind and mindfulness is probably very important, I imagine. Speaking of pasture, can you tell us a bit about pasture, especially those early days of the conception of your company? How did pasture come about, and what problem were you trying to solve?
Yeah, well, pasture.io started back in 2005, and it all started with a conversation around the milk vat after the evening milking had finished. So my uncle and my dad were standing there talking as they have for decades, and here I am, a young Ollie, thinking he knows the best, telling them how it should be done, and asking lots of questions, very, very curious to understand and to innocently understand why they're making the decisions that they're making, why they're not making the decisions as effectively as I thought they could be, and that was around, where the animals should graze next and things like that. Through this conversation with my uncle and dad, I got the feedback that was, right, you little shit, if you think you can do it better, then you decide where the animals or where the herd will graze next. So that, little did I know at the time, that was just putting a big weight on my shoulders, a lot of responsibility handed to me right then, and that was to basically decide the profitable outcomes of our family dairy farm. So I started asking even more questions and questions outside of just my father and my uncle, and questions such as, how do you know how much pasture is in a paddock? How do you know how much pasture an animal can eat? Do animals waste pasture? Like what's the go with the cow clumps or the pasture clumps you see in the paddock? How do you put those into formulas and calculations? Right, many questions, So how quickly should the cows rotationally graze around the farm? So these questions started leading towards, led me towards walking the farm once a week with a rising plate meter. So previously on our farm, we'd maybe measured the farm once a quarter, if we were lucky, maybe once a season sort of thing, to get a good understanding of where the average farm pasture cover was sitting. I could see an opportunity to tighten this up, and that's where the weekly pasture walks came in around 17 years ago. Before long, we were collecting a lot of data or a lot of information. So that information were things like, how much pasture was in a paddock, how quickly or what the growth rate of the pasture was in each paddock across the farm. The other bits of information were around grazings. So how long had it been since paddocks were last grazed? And all of this information we were collecting in, to begin with, was a spreadsheet, and then it became a FileMaker database before it turned back into a spreadsheet. And we're able to really start to get and make better grazing decisions. So decisions that ultimately drives the profitability and the sustainability of our farm operation. So what I'm saying is the problem that pasture.io first evolved to overcome was how can we make best use of manual pasture measurements to make informed grazing decisions. So I guess that's where the program has come from, and now we have things like remote pasture measurements and things where we're not walking the farm, but it's still the same principle of timely grazing of pastures, for taking into account how much biomass or how many kilograms of dry matter is in each paddock, as well as what is the leaf stage of each paddock. So understanding day since grazed and rotation length and balancing all of that.
That's an incredible story. Something as simple as a conversation can spark such a big journey for you. And I guess when you talk about transitioning to now, when you fast forward to pasture.io today, and that conversation from the milk vat, where's pasture.io at now, and what do you offer, and how do farmers use your product currently?
Yeah, very good question. Where is pasture.io now? So, and how do farmers use the product? Well, pasture.io in 2014 turned into a web platform, and that web platform meant that we were finally able to transfer data without breaking the data and the formulas. So because this spreadsheet that had grown over nearly 10 years had grown into a monster that included fertilizer applications, grazing records, how many kilos of grain or silage or pasture were being fed to each cow, all of this data. And each time we'd transfer that, it would break. So the web platform was developed in 2014 to overcome that. And then in 2016, we publicly launched pasture.io. Now, if people do remember 2016, it's scarred into everyone's minds who dairy farm for the clawback year. So it was a terrible time to release. So I went on to follow other pursuits, and then in 2018, the daily flyover constellation of the Planet Labs satellite constellation enabled the remote pasture measurements. Now, why the daily flyover is important is because dairy farming happens generally in high rainfall areas where there's lots of cloud cover. So the daily flyover frequency increases the chance of getting a clear morning or a clear image to provide a satellite-backed pasture measurement. So the program has evolved from utilizing manual pasture measurements to make informed grazing decisions to now automating those pasture measurements using satellites. And today, where we're at, in 2020, we embarked on redesigning the app into a version 2, which is still under development, but very much what we're training everyone in now. Now, version 2 works well on your phone. It's fast and we're able to manipulate information so you can view things such as your paddock performance and where to graze cows easier. And at the end of last year, we started to work with the with Farm Pulse in Tasmania with their GPS trackers as a partner to help provide the auto grazer. So the auto grazer means that farmers can put GPS trackers on their animals now, and when those animals enter into a paddock, it then records the grazing. So all of that information is being collected automatically. So a farmer can pick up their phone, see, oh yeah, that paddock was 20 days since it was last grazed. Currently, leaf emergence is at 8 days, so it's around 2.5 leaf stage. So they can make these decisions without actually having to pull out a notepad or record any of these data points onto a whiteboard or into another spreadsheet or anything like that. Am I answering your question of where the program is now? And
definitely, yeah. And I guess Farm Pulse is another fantastic Tassie ag tech story, isn't it? And I think maybe we might have to get them into the High Performance Herd studio at some stage because they're up to some pretty cool things as well. You did mention on a previous conversation the importance of the timing of recording that grazing. So do you see this auto grazer, maybe really another great step in optimizing pasture utilization?
Yes, certainly. I see the auto grazer as helping close the loop with remote pasture measurements. So, like everything, we work with a whole group of farmers. So we work with some that just want a feed wedge; they don't want anything else. We've got others that mainly are concerned around days since grazing. They're not or leaf stage, not so much concerned around biomass. And then you've got farmers that just want to use everything. They want to record all their fertilizer applications, all their grazings, everything. So we work with a whole range of farmers that have different needs. And I guess the key with the auto grazer is that it enables all of those farmers to be able to utilize a closed loop system. Now, by closed loop system, what I mean is that the grazing activities or the grazing events being recorded and maintained is integral to getting accurate remote pasture measurements or satellite-backed pasture measurements. So without the grazing events, the satellite-backed pasture measurements are suboptimal. So it can be an annoying thing for a farmer to do, is to maintain a grazing record. We've made it as simple as you can. So you use the version 2 app, you show it on your phone, and you just open up and you simply go click, yes, I grazed that paddock there, save. So it's very easy. And our encouragement is for people to make it habitual. But the thing with the auto grazer is it just removes that completely. So if a farmer doesn't want to make it a habitual thing that they keep their grazings recorded or up to date, they can just simply pick up their phone and see the feed wedge, and that feed wedge will be very accurate based on the satellites flying overhead and the automatic grazing entries that are being recorded. So that's the key part of the auto grazer and the GPS trackers.
It's fantastic, and I guess one big problem farmers are facing is that multiple data entry points. And I know myself, even for the focus farm, I've actually been entering the calvings for the collars, and matings are the same. It's nothing to get 5 days behind, and all of a sudden, instead of having 20 records to enter, you've all of a sudden got 200, and it's turned in from something to do over a coffee to something that's going to take all day. So I think the more we can automate that type of task, the better we're going to be off. I'd like to talk about the satellites themselves, it seems quite sort of futuristic, but it's a pretty out there statement to go from a pasture plate metering to looking to space. How did that actually happen? The thought of using satellites, and how do the satellites actually measure pasture from way up there?
Very good question. It's I think when it comes to the marketing message, it's easier to sell it as satellite pasture measurements, but that's not entirely the whole picture. So the satellites by themselves are very good at measuring pasture within a narrow window, and that narrow window can be optimized based on the grazing system. So generally with a dairy farm system like the one behind me, where it's high rainfall, it's lush pastures, those sort of things, the narrow window is pitched between about 2,000 kilos and 2,500 kilos of dry matter per hectare. Now, anything over 2,500, the satellites can't really see or can't help too much, because the way the satellites work is that they fly over, they scan the Earth, they take an image, and they extract different wavelengths of color. Now, there's only so much color that the satellites can extract, or the optics can extract from what it sees at 2,500 and above, before the plant hits saturation. So just imagine the leaves are starting to fold over at 2,500, and by 3,000 we all know like leaves are covered and you've got canopy closure. So that the satellites or the models cannot actually see any more color on the ground. So we have to, in that case, we need to start to bring in other elements. Now, those other elements are driven by things like the growth rate of the pasture. Now, that's when we bring in the weather data. So we've got satellite images, we've got the local weather data, so things like precipitation, evapotranspiration, temperature, and those sort of things. And then there's a third element that we bring in. So the first is satellite images, the second is local weather data, and the third is the paddock activities, so the grazings, which we've discussed quite a lot now, is quite important for the remote pasture measurements. So the grazings is a key part, and that all of that information is fed into the models. Now the models then are able to produce, based on the information that is known, how much pasture is in each paddock, or how quickly the pasture is growing. So in a nutshell, how do satellites measure pasture? Well, satellites are a key component of the remote sensing, but it's not the satellites alone. It is the satellite images working in conjunction with all of this other information that we put into these machine learning models.
That's fantastic. That's a great explanation, Ollie. Yeah, thanks for that. And I guess the thought of satellites just screaming around and taking photos and solving all our problems, you've explained that it's a multi-pronged approach. And again, a lot of these technologies are as good as their interaction with the people in the business as well. Obviously entering grazings and recording information timely. So yeah, it's same with a lot of collar technologies and that type of thing. I'd love to know where you're heading with pasture.io. I've seen on Facebook, LinkedIn, you've got a bit of a presence on social media. I get a few emails from you as well with some pretty cool information around what's happening around the place. You're sort of really up with what's happening in our industry, and not just pasture, but I've seen things around biosecurity and all other types of factors that will come into it. And yeah, what's happening in the future for pasture? I've seen some stuff around Europe and things like that. What's the future look like?
The future looks very green, like behind me. It's well managed pastures, a good climate. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you're right, Andrew. We're continuing to expand, and we drive a fairly organic sales and marketing approach. So we're not about aggressively trying to get out there and get customers on board. It's more about trying to build awareness of what we're doing with people and with farmers, and working by word of mouth. So for us, it's more about delivering something of quality and something of value. So something that is actually useful and can replace the rising plate meter, and also can lift farmers from who've never used a rising plate meter, from eyeball grazing to using pasture readings to make informed grazing decisions. So for us, it's about the future is about continuing to work with farmers in helping, like, in helping yourself make better grazing decisions. So if we can help you relieve your the mental daily decision making burden on where you're going to graze your cows, and we can do that effectively, then that is the future, and that we're doing our job well. Yeah.
That's
so does that resonate with yourself, Andrew? In terms of I know you were dairy farming, and I think there is a certain element of a decision making fatigue that is put on managers in terms of every day they've got to make a decision. It could be twice a day grazing or whatever it is. And I think that's underestimated how much that plays on your mind if you want to make good grazing decisions. Does that resonate?
Most definitely, and the slippery slope of a farm manager that sets their rotation in the spring and follows every paddock, all the way around, and it doesn't deviate all spring. And I think that ability to be dynamic and move with the environment and what's actually happening on farm is where our future lies, especially for sustainability and that type of thing. We really have to look at where that next gain is. So it definitely resonates. And you've offered a lot of value to our listeners and to the people. I think, and I've found that in Tasmania, a lot of businesses are really about offering value and solving problems, and they're not really focused on the bottom line and how many subscribers have I got and that type of thing. And it's a really cool culture that we have in our dairy industry, that we've all got each other's backs, and that's what I love about this project as well. Yeah, so it's fantastic. I'd really like to know, we probably can look at wrapping things up. It's been a fantastic journey of Pasture.io and where you've come from, where you are, and where you're going. And it's a great story of your conversation from the vat. I like how you call it the vat. A lot of people call it the silo or whatever. So it sounds very Kiwi of you. And it's just a great story that even farmers could resonate with if they're thinking about maybe a side hustle or something that they can offer our industry. Anything's possible in this world. I think you probably agree with that. I'd love to know what key takeaway or what's one really point that you would love people to come away with when they're making that next step for their business.
Yes. Okay. So I could say that very, very quickly. That would be proactive and not reactive. So though with those words, what I'm trying to say there, and what I've tried to say through like this whole discussion, is that if you can remove the daily decision making fatigue, or you can reduce that mental daily burden, and by being proactive and not reactive, you can relieve or reduce a lot of stress in the system. And if you look at the main pillars of farming, whatever they are, whatever you define them as, whether that's feed, pastures, people, finance, all of those sort of things, if you can be proactive and not reactive with your planning and strategy and tactical decision making, then things will line up. You'll be happy, your animals will be happy, and that's the key.
That's awesome. What a fantastic takeaway. And really want to thank you very much for your time today, coming to talk to us. And hopefully maybe we'll get you back in here one day, and we'll also bring you into the high performance herd journey, and we'll see what we can come up with along the way. So I really want to thank you very much. Much appreciated. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. It's been an absolute pleasure, and looking forward to watching how the high performance herd produces, valuable information for everyone that's following.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to the High Performance Herd podcast. Thanks to the sponsors, Fonterra, Idexx, Koru Diagnostics, TasHerd, the Tasmanian Dairy Trust, Zoetis, NHIA, Datamars. Feel free to subscribe and review the podcast. Share it with your friends. The more, the merrier. Jump on Facebook, search the High Performance Herd Project, and you're very welcome to join the High Performance Herd private Facebook group. If you want to see a video of this podcast, jump on YouTube or www.highperformanceherd.com, where you'll see a link to these sponsors for more information on the High Performance Herd Project, which is a real-life dairy farm, spring block calving right here in Tassie. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.